Mr. Blackwood wants the Morrison proposal redone by tomorrow morning, announced Jordan, the executive assistant whose perpetual frown had greeted Larissa Winters 10 minutes ago on her first day at Blackwood Enterprises. Larissa's stomach tightened. That's the presentation scheduled for the board meeting at noon? The very one. Previous architect quit yesterday. Said something about tyrannical demands. Jordan handed her a sleek tablet. Everything's here. Good luck. Taking the tablet with steady hands that betrayed none of her inner panic, Larissa nodded. 6 years of clawing her way back from financial ruin had prepared her for challenges, if not for the notorious Thaddeus Blackwood himself. Conference room A in 15 minutes, Jordan added, already walking away. He wants to review your understanding of the project. 15 minutes. To understand a proposal that had apparently taken someone else weeks to prepare. Larissa ducked into her newly assigned office, a glass-walled space that offered little privacy but spectacular views of Boston's skyline. She quickly scanned through the files while wrestling her auburn hair into a tight bun. The Morrison project was ambitious, a sustainable mixed-use development in Seattle that would redefine urban living spaces. The renderings were impressive, but the execution details seemed haphazard, with frequent compromises to the sustainability features that were supposedly the cornerstone of the project. By the time Larissa entered conference room A, she had formed some strong opinions. 5 stern faces turned toward her, but only one commanded her full attention. Thaddeus Blackwood sat at the head of the table, his charcoal suit immaculately tailored, his dark eyes assessing her with cold calculation. At 38, he had the confidence of a man who had doubled his inherited fortune through ruthless business acumen. His reputation for perfectionism was legendary, as was his impatience with those who failed to meet his standards. "Ms. Winters," he said, his voice deeper than she'd expected. "Since you're new, I'll explain how this works. You present your understanding of the Morrison project, I critique, you listen. Clear?" Larissa gripped her tablet. "Perfectly. Begin." She connected her tablet to the display system and pulled up the first slide. The Morrison project has potential to be revolutionary, but in its current form, it's merely conventional with a green veneer. A charged silence filled the room. In her peripheral vision, she saw one of the executives wince. "That's a bold statement for someone who's been here less than an hour," Blackwood said, his expression unchanged. "Bold but accurate," Larissa countered, flipping to a technical specification. These materials claim to prioritize sustainability, but they're actually standard grade with minimal environmental benefits. And these spatial configurations waste nearly 20% of potentially usable area. She continued methodically through her assessment, highlighting flaws and suggesting alternatives. With each point, she expected interruption, but Blackwood remained silent, his intense gaze never leaving her face. When she finished, he finally spoke. "You've essentially torn apart a project we've spent months developing. I've identified how it's failing to meet your stated objectives," she corrected. A woman with a sleek silver bob, Diane Mercer, the chief operations officer, according to the organization chart Larissa had memorized, leaned forward. "Thad, she has valid points. The board has been asking questions about the sustainability metrics." Blackwood stood abruptly. "Everyone out. Except you, Ms. Winters." The executives filed out quickly, leaving Larissa alone with the billionaire. He approached the window, his back to her as he gazed out at the city. "Do you know how many architects would kill for this position?" he asked without turning. "Presumably the same number who would be afraid to tell you the truth about a flawed project," she replied. He turned then, something flickering in his expression. "You're not afraid of me." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "I'm afraid of submitting substandard work." "Why?" The question caught her off guard. "Because I believe in excellence. And because I've seen what happens when corners are cut." For several long seconds, he studied her, as if trying to decipher a complex equation. Finally, he nodded once. "Redo the entire proposal. Make it actually revolutionary, not just superficially green. You have 3 days. The board meeting will be postponed. I'd rather present something worthwhile than waste their time." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, Ms. Winters. If you're going to challenge me, always be prepared to offer solutions. Criticism without alternatives is just complaint." After he left, Larissa released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Through the glass walls, she saw him stop at Jordan's desk, saying something that made the assistant look toward her with wide eyes. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Access granted to the company's top-tier design software, unlimited budget for research materials, and a team of 3 junior architects assigned to assist her. As she walked back to her office, she caught snippets of whispered conversations. Challenge Blackwood on her first day, either brilliant or suicidal. A tall woman with impeccable blonde hair and a designer suit that probably cost more than Larissa's monthly rent stepped directly into her path. I'm Vivian Ashcroft, head of strategic partnerships. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Quite the impression you've made. Just doing my job, Larissa replied evenly. Word of advice? Thaddeus doesn't like being contradicted publicly. He may tolerate it once for novelty, but tread carefully. Vivian's perfectly manicured hand touched Larissa's arm briefly. Boston's architecture community is smaller than you might think. Reputations matter. Before Larissa could respond, Vivian glided away, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and unmistakable threat. 3 days to redesign a major project. Larissa rolled up her sleeves and began assembling her new team. If Thaddeus Blackwood wanted revolutionary, she would deliver exactly that, and prove that she belonged in these gleaming halls of power where her father had once been destroyed. 3 weeks later, Larissa's redesigned Morrison project had earned her both admiration and resentment throughout Blackwood Enterprises. The board meeting had gone exceptionally well, with her innovative approach to sustainable urban development receiving unanimous approval. Since then, she'd been assigned to Thaddeus Blackwood's Special Projects team, a coveted position that had her working directly with the enigmatic CEO. The Winters effect, whispered a junior architect as Larissa passed through the design department. 3 weeks, and already his favorite. She pretended not to hear. Favoritism wasn't her goal, excellence was. And if that meant occasionally finding herself in heated debates with one of the most powerful men in Boston, so be it. Today, she was reviewing plans for a new project when Jordan appeared at her door. Mr. Blackwood wants you in his office. Now, Larissa gathered her materials. Is it about the Riverside development? It's about something more interesting, Jordan replied, lowering her voice. Harrison Pierce was seen in the building earlier. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but Larissa couldn't place it. Who's Harrison Pierce? Corporate raider. Works with Vivian Ashcroft now. They say he and Blackwood have bad blood dating back years. Jordan glanced around. He looked right at your office when he was here. Asked who you were. A chill ran down Larissa's spine, though she couldn't explain why. Thanks for the heads up. Thaddeus Blackwood's office occupied the top floor, with panoramic views of Boston Harbor. When Larissa entered, he was standing by the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the afternoon light. You requested to see me, Mr. Blackwood? He turned, and she was struck again by the intensity in his dark eyes. Thad, he corrected. We'll be working closely together. First names make sense. All right. Thad. The name felt strange on her tongue. What can I help with? Seattle. He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. The Morrison project is moving forward faster than anticipated. The city officials are impressed with your sustainable design. They want to meet next week. Next week, Larissa took a seat. That's unusually fast for municipal approval. That's what happens when you design something that solves problems they didn't even know they had. For a moment, something almost like pride flickered across his face. We fly out Monday. Plan to stay at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Her mind raced through her nearly empty social calendar. No real conflicts there, but the time frame suggested a deeper involvement than she'd anticipated. Problem. His eyebrow arched slightly. No, just surprised at the timeline. He nodded, then slid a file across the desk. There's more. I'm expanding the project. These adjacent properties just came on the market. I want preliminary concepts for incorporating them by Friday. Larissa quickly reviewed the documents. This triples the scope. Friday is challenging, I know. That's why I requested you specifically. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Unless you'd prefer I assign someone else? The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. I'll have it done. Something that might have been satisfaction crossed his features. Good. There's also a charity gala tomorrow night. Important clients will be there. Or something appropriate. Before she could respond to the unexpected directive, a knock at the door interrupted them. Vivian Ashcroft entered without waiting for a response. her crimson dress making her look like a splash of blood against the office's monochrome design. "Thad, darling," she purred, then paused at the sight of Larissa. "Oh, am I interrupting?" "Just finishing," he replied, his expression cooling noticeably. Vivian approached, extending a hand to Larissa. "We meet again. I hear your redesign impressed everyone. Such talent from someone so new." Larissa shook her hand briefly. "Thank you." "Vivian," Thad said, his tone clipped. "Ms. Winters and I were discussing the Seattle project." "Ah yes, Seattle." Vivian smiled. "Such an ambitious undertaking. I just had lunch with Councilman Rivera. He mentioned certain environmental groups have concerns about the development." Thad's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "We've addressed all environmental regulations." "Of course you have." Vivian turned to Larissa. "But public perception matters as much as regulations, doesn't it? One negative campaign can delay a project for months, years even." The subtle threat wasn't lost on Larissa. "Our design exceeds environmental standards by 40%. We're creating habitats, not destroying them." "Passionate," Vivian commented to Thad. "I can see why you like her." She checked her watch. "I should go. Harrison is waiting for me downstairs. He was quite interested to hear about your new architect, by the way." After she left, Thad remained silent for a long moment. "You should know something about Vivian," he finally said. "She doesn't make idle conversation. Every word is calculated." "I gathered that," Larissa replied. "What's her connection to Harrison Pierce?" Thad's expression hardened. "Business associates, among other things." He stood, signaling the end of their meeting. "Be careful around both of them. Pierce has a talent for discovering vulnerabilities and exploiting them." As Larissa turned to leave, Thad added, "About tomorrow's gala. A car will pick you up at 7. "I don't recall accepting the invitation," she pointed out. His mouth quirked slightly. "Was that unclear?" "It wasn't an invitation, Ms. Winters. It was a requirement." The dismissive tone sparked her temper. "My contract doesn't include mandatory social events. Your contract includes project promotion, which is exactly what tomorrow is." His voice remained level, but his eyes had darkened. "Unless you have a pressing engagement elsewhere?" She didn't, but his presumption irritated her. "Fine." 7 o'clock. Back in her office, Larissa immersed herself in the expanded Seattle plans, but her concentration kept drifting. 2 weeks in Seattle working directly with Thad. A gala tomorrow night. Vivian's veiled threats. And the strange reaction to Harrison Pierce's name. Her phone rang, displaying an unfamiliar number. Larissa Winters. "Ms. Winters." The male voice was smooth, unfamiliar. "Harrison Pierce. I hope I'm not interrupting." Her pulse quickened. "How did you get my number?" "I make it my business to know promising talent." A pause. "Especially when that talent works for Thaddeus Blackwood." "What do you want, Mr. Pierce?" "Just to introduce myself. Your name seemed familiar when I saw it on the directory today." "Winters. Any relation to Maxwell Winters, perhaps?" The mention of her father's name sent a jolt through her. "I need to go." "Of course. But Ms. Winters," his voice hardened slightly, "you might want to ask your impressive new boss about MaxCore Properties. 2008. Curious coincidence, you ending up at Blackwood Enterprises." The line went dead before she could respond. Larissa sat motionless, the name MaxCore Properties echoing in her mind. Her father's failed company. The beginning of their family's downfall. What did Thaddeus Blackwood have to do with it? She was still pondering this when her office door opened again. Jordan stood there, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "What is it?" Larissa asked. "There's something you should see." Jordan handed her a tabloid magazine open to a gossip page. "It's making rounds in the break room." The headline read, "Blackwood's New Muse? Billionaire developer seen with mystery woman." Below was a grainy photo of her and Thad leaving the office building, his hand at the small of her back as he guided her toward his car after a late meeting. "Great," Larissa muttered. "There's more talk," Jordan said quietly. "About how quickly you've risen. About you and him." Larissa handed the magazine back. "People always talk." "Yes, but," Jordan hesitated. "Be careful. The last woman who got close to Thaddeus Blackwood ended up with a ruined career and a broken heart." "Vivian." Jordan nodded. "Before she allied with Pierce. Just watch yourself." After Jordan left, Larissa turned to the window, watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city. 6 years of rebuilding her life, carefully avoiding anything connected to her father's downfall. Now here she was, working for a man who might have been involved somehow. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dress is being delivered to your apartment. Car at 7. TB, Larissa stared at the message. The presumption was infuriating. The control unsettling. And most disturbing of all was the small thrill that ran through her at the thought of tomorrow night. Thaddeus Blackwood stood alone in his penthouse, scotch in hand, staring at the file on his desk. Maxwell Winters, Max Core Properties. The label was faded, the contents rarely disturbed over the last decade. The gala had gone precisely as planned. Larissa had arrived looking stunning in the midnight blue gown he'd selected, turning heads throughout the ballroom. More importantly, she'd impressed key investors with her articulate explanations of the Seattle project. What he hadn't planned for was his own reaction to her. The distracting awareness of her presence across a crowded room, the unexpected pleasure of their verbal sparring. Now, 3 days later, he couldn't shake the growing unease. Winters. The name had hit him like a physical blow when HR first forwarded her application. He'd nearly rejected it outright, but curiosity had compelled him to interview her. Nothing in her demeanor had suggested she knew about his connection to her father's downfall. Yet Harrison Pierce's sudden interest suggested the past wouldn't remain buried much longer. His phone buzzed. Diane Mercer, his COO. "You're working late," he answered. "So are you," she replied. "I just left the office. Your new architect is still there. Hasn't left since morning, from what security says." Thad checked his watch, 11:30 p.m. "The Seattle expansion plans are due tomorrow. That's not why I'm calling." Pierce was asking questions about her today. Approached several staff members. Thad's grip tightened on his glass. "What kind of questions?" "About her qualifications, her relationship with you, and whether anyone knew about her father." "Damn it," Thad muttered. "He's going to tell her." "Maybe that's for the best," Diane said carefully. "Before Seattle, no." His tone was final. "Not yet. I need to handle this carefully." After hanging up, Thad returned to the file, pulling out the old newspaper clippings. Max Core Properties declares bankruptcy. Maxwell Winters hospitalized following collapse at creditors' meeting. Boston developer dies after year-long health struggle. The guilt was as fresh as it had been 10 years ago. He hadn't intended for things to end that way. It was supposed to be a simple business acquisition, until Harrison Pierce had interfered. His doorman called up. Ms. Winters was downstairs, insisting on seeing him. Thad closed the file and slipped it into his safe before authorizing her to come up. When the elevator opened directly into his penthouse, Larissa stood there clutching a portfolio, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "This couldn't wait until morning?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. "You said you wanted the Seattle expansion plans tomorrow. They're done." She stepped into the apartment, then paused, taking in the panoramic views of Boston at night. "I was working late anyway. And you came across town at midnight to deliver them personally?" She met his gaze directly. "No, I came to ask you about Max Core Properties." The name hung between them. Thad walked to the bar, pouring himself another scotch. "Would you like a drink?" "I want answers." Her voice had hardened. "Harrison Pierce called me. Mentioned my father's company and suggested you were somehow involved in its collapse." Thad turned to face her. "Pierce is manipulating you. He and Vivian are trying to disrupt the Seattle project. So there's no connection? You had nothing to do with Max Core." He hesitated just long enough for her to notice. "It's complicated. Uncomplicated." She stepped closer. "My father lost everything. Died believing he'd failed his family. If you had something to do with that, I tried to save Max Core," Thad interrupted, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Your father's company was undervalued but promising. I was negotiating to acquire it, preserve its assets, keep the management team. But someone leaked confidential information. Banks called in loans prematurely. By the time I could restructure the deal, it was too late." He didn't mention his suspicions about Pierce's role in the leak. That was an accusation without proof. Larissa's face had paled. "So you knew exactly who I was when you hired me?" "Yes." "Why?" "Guilt." The question hit uncomfortably close to the truth, but there was more to it. "You were the most qualified applicant." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight." He nodded toward her portfolio. "Are those the expansion plans?" She recognized the deflection but seemed too exhausted to push further. She handed him the portfolio. "The research you requested is included. Environmental impact studies, community integration proposals, everything." He set it aside without opening it. You should go home, get some rest. The car's waiting to take you to the airport at 9 tomorrow. I still have questions, and I might have answers. In Seattle. He walked toward the elevator, away from Pierce and Vivian's interference. Larissa hesitated, then followed. This conversation isn't over. I'm counting on it. The next morning, as their private jet soared over clouds, Thad observed Larissa reviewing documents across the aisle. She'd been professionally cordial but emotionally distant since boarding. Understandable, given the previous night's revelation. You should know, he said, breaking the silence, that the Seattle project is being watched by more than just investors and city officials. She looked up. What do you mean? Vivian and Pierce have been acquiring properties adjacent to our development through shell companies. They're planning something. Why tell me this? Because they'll try to use you. Your connection to MaxCore makes you a potential weapon against me. He met her gaze. I need to know if that's going to be a problem. Her eyes flashed. You're questioning my professional integrity. I'm acknowledging a complicated situation. Before she could respond, the pilot announced they were beginning their descent. The Seattle skyline emerged through breaks in the clouds, the Space Needle punctuating the mist-shrouded landscape. Beautiful, isn't it? Thad murmured. Yes, she admitted, her anger momentarily forgotten as she gazed out the window. That's why this project matters. Beyond profit margins and corporate rivalries. He leaned forward. What happened with your father's company was a tragedy. I carry responsibility for not preventing it, even if I didn't cause it. But this project, what we're creating, matters more than the past. Something shifted in her expression, not forgiveness, but perhaps a willingness to listen. Then stop withholding information. If you want my trust, earn it. The jet touched down smoothly, taxiing toward a private hangar where a sleek black car waited. Ms. Winters, he said as they prepared to disembark, what do you know about your father's former business partner? She frowned. Camden Reynolds? Not much. He left the company before things went bad. Dad never talked about him. Thad nodded, a piece falling into place. Camden Reynolds was Harrison Pierce's uncle. And he didn't leave. He was forced out by your father after a dispute about the company's direction. What are you suggesting? That perhaps Pierce's interest in you isn't coincidental. And that MaxCore's failure might have had more architects than you realize. He gestured toward the exit. After you. As they walked across the tarmac, Larissa's phone chimed with a text. She glanced at it, her face paling. Problem? Thad asked. She showed him the screen. An anonymous message with an attached photo of Thad and Maxwell Winters arguing heatedly, dated just days before MaxCore's bankruptcy announcement. The caption read, Ask him what really happened that day. Perfect timing, Thad said grimly. Let me guess, unknown number? She nodded. How did they get this? The same way they're getting to you. By carefully orchestrating every move. He studied her face. What do you want to do? The question seemed to surprise her. What do you mean? You can walk away. Return to Boston. No professional consequences. I'll understand. For a long moment, she stared at the photo, then looked up at the Seattle skyline emerging through the mist, and finally back at him. No, she said firmly. I want the truth. All of it. And I want to finish what we started. The project. That too. Her green eyes held his with unexpected intensity. I've spent 6 years trying to rebuild after my father's death. I won't let Pierce or anyone else control my future with pieces of the past. Something shifted between them in that moment, an understanding beyond words, a recognition of shared purpose despite the complications of their history. Then let's give them something to worry about, Thad said, holding the car door open for her. As they drove toward downtown Seattle, neither noticed the black sedan that pulled out from the private terminal behind them, its lone occupant speaking quietly into a phone. They've arrived, Harrison Pierce said. And she's still with him. Proceed with the next phase. The Seattle rain had been relentless for 3 days. What had begun as light drizzle upon their arrival had transformed into a torrential downpour, flooding roads and delaying construction site visits. Larissa stood at the window of the hotel suite's sitting room, watching raindrops race down the glass while thunder rumbled in the distance. Weather forecast says it'll continue through tomorrow, Thad said, entering with 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to her, careful not to let their fingers touch, a small courtesy that had become routine in their week of forced proximity. The city council meeting will be postponed again, she noted, accepting the coffee. Probably for the best. Gives us time to address their latest concerns. Their professional relationship had found a tentative equilibrium during their stay in Seattle. Days filled with meetings, site surveys, and revisions to plans. Evenings spent in adjoining suites, working separately but connected by the sitting room they now shared. Personal conversations had been sparse, both avoiding the unresolved questions about MaxCore properties. Lightning flashed, followed immediately by a thunderclap that rattled the windows. The lights flickered, then went out completely. "Perfect," Thad muttered in the sudden darkness. His phone illuminated his face as he checked it. Hotel says backup generators should kick in for essential systems only. No elevators, limited power. Larissa's phone chimed with a notification. All appointments for tomorrow canceled due to severe weather warnings. "Looks like we're stuck here," she said, moving to light the candles that the hotel had provided earlier as a precaution. In the warm glow that followed, the suite felt smaller, more intimate. Thad shrugged off his suit jacket and loosened his tie, small gestures of informality that seemed significant after days of careful professional distance. "We should review the environmental impact revisions," he suggested, clearly seeking the safety of work. "We've been reviewing documents for 12 hours, Larissa countered. "Even you need to rest sometimes." A hint of amusement crossed his features. "What do you suggest?" She hadn't thought that far ahead. Conversation? Something other than property acquisitions and sustainable materials. He hesitated, then nodded toward the bar cabinet. "Drink." She accepted a glass of wine, and they settled into opposite ends of the sofa. The candlelight softened his features, making him look younger, less guarded. "Tell me about your father," he said unexpectedly. Larissa tensed. "Why?" "Because I only knew him as a business entity. A signature on documents." He met her gaze. "I'd like to know the man." She studied him, searching for hidden motives, but finding only genuine interest. He was brilliant but naive. Trusted too easily. Believed the best in people even when they proved him wrong. She took a sip of wine. After MaxCore collapsed, he changed. The light went out of him. "I'm sorry." The simple words carried unexpected weight. "Your turn," she said. "Tell me something real about Thaddeus Blackwood." He considered, then set his glass down. "I was 13 when my father died. Heart attack at his desk, right in the middle of a hostile takeover. My mother wanted to sell the company. I convinced her to let me run it when I turned 21. That's a lot of responsibility for someone so young. I wasn't given a choice. The Blackwood name comes with expectations." His voice had hardened. "My father built his empire by crushing competitors. I wanted to build differently. Is that why you tried to save MaxCore instead of dismantling it?" The question hung between them. Finally, he nodded. "Your father had vision. His designs were innovative, ahead of their time in sustainable development. Skills you clearly inherited. But something went wrong," she prompted. "Information leaked. Financing collapsed overnight." His expression darkened. "I couldn't prove it, but I suspected Pierce even then. He had connections to your father's partner." Thunder crashed again, closer this time. The storm was intensifying, mirroring the tension in the room. "Why didn't you tell me this when you hired me?" she asked. "Would you have accepted the position if I had?" She considered the question honestly. Probably not. Exactly. Another flash of lightning, another rumble. Rain pounded against the windows. "After my father died," Larissa said quietly, "I swore I'd never be that vulnerable again. I changed my last name for my early career, didn't want to be associated with failure. Built my reputation through small firms before reclaiming my identity. And now I'm sitting in a storm-darkened room with the man who might have been responsible for destroying my family." She met his gaze directly. "Yet somehow, I don't believe you were." His expression shifted, something raw and unexpected emerging. "I've made many mistakes, Larissa. Your father wasn't one of them." The use of her first name, the first time he'd said it, created a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The storm, the isolation, the candlelight, all conspired to dismantle the careful barriers they'd constructed. "We should get some rest," Thad said, standing abruptly. "Tomorrow will be complicated." She nodded, an inexplicable disappointment washing over her. "Good night, then." As she turned toward her room, her phone rang. Vivian Ashcroft's name flashed on the screen. Thad saw it too. "Don't answer." "Why not?" "Because nothing she says will be accidental or innocent." Larissa let the call go to voicemail, but moments later, a text arrived. "Ask him about the Sanderson file. The real reason MaxCore failed." The storm outside seemed suddenly distant compared to the one brewing within. The next morning dawned clear, the storm having blown itself out overnight. Larissa had barely slept, Vivian's cryptic message about the Sanderson file echoing in her thoughts. She'd nearly confronted Thad immediately, but had forced herself to wait, to approach this strategically rather than emotionally. She found him in the sitting room, already dressed and working, his laptop open on the coffee table. The power had been restored, normalcy returning with the morning light, erasing the strange intimacy of the previous night. "Good morning," he said without looking up. "The revised environmental reports just came in. We should review them before the meeting this afternoon." "What's the Sanderson file?" she asked directly. His fingers stilled on the keyboard. "Where did you hear that name?" "Vivian's text last night." He closed his laptop slowly. "And you're only asking me now? I wanted to see your unguarded reaction." A humorless smile touched his lips. "Calculating. I'm impressed." "Stop deflecting, Thad. What is the Sanderson file, and what does it have to do with my father's company?" He stood, walking to the window. For a moment, she thought he might refuse to answer, but then he spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "Sanderson was a commercial property in downtown Boston. One of your father's last acquisitions before MaxScore's collapse, leveraged heavily with loans from my bank." He turned to face her. "There were structural issues discovered during renovation. Issues that should have been disclosed during the sale, but weren't. And," she prompted, sensing there was more, "and fixing those issues would have cost millions that MaxScore didn't have. Your father came to me for additional financing. Understanding began to dawn. You refused. I couldn't justify it to my board. The property was already underwater." His expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. A week later, the banks called in their loans. MaxScore collapsed. Larissa absorbed this, pieces clicking into place. "So you did cause my father's bankruptcy?" "No. The structural issues in the Sanderson building did. The seller who concealed those issues did." His voice hardened. "And whoever leaked confidential information about MaxScore's financial situation to the banks did." Convenient explanations. The truth rarely fits into neat narratives, Larissa. Her phone chimed, a text message from an unknown number. She opened it to find a photograph of a document with Blackwood Enterprises letterhead, dated 1 week before MaxScore's bankruptcy announcement. It appeared to be an internal memo from Thad to his board, recommending aggressive action against MaxScore's assets. She held up the phone. "Explain this." His face paled slightly as he took the phone, scanning the document. "Where did this come from?" Another mysterious text. "Is it authentic?" He handed the phone back. "Yes, but incomplete. What you're seeing was draft language that was revised before the final recommendation. Pierce is showing you what supports his narrative, which is that I deliberately destroyed your father's company." His gaze held her steadily, when in reality, "I was trying to structure a controlled bankruptcy that would have preserved core assets, retained key personnel, and protected your family's financial interests." Larissa wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root. "Prove it." "The complete file is in Boston, in my private safe. I can have it sent." Her phone rang. Another unknown number. She answered, putting it on speaker. "Ms. Winters." Harrison Pierce's smooth voice filled the room. "I trust you received my messages." Thad's expression darkened, but he remained silent. "What do you want, Pierce?" Larissa asked. "To offer you something Blackwood never will, the whole truth. Check your email. You'll find the complete Sanderson file, including documents Blackwood has kept hidden for a decade." The call ended abruptly. Almost immediately, her email notification chimed. "Don't open it," Thad warned. "At least not until you hear me out." "Why should I trust you over documented evidence?" "Because documents can be altered. Context can be manipulated." He stepped closer. "And because despite everything, I think you know I'm telling you the truth." She hesitated, torn between the mounting evidence against him and her own instincts that suggested there was more to the story than Pierce was revealing. "Your father came to me the day before the bankruptcy announcement," Thad continued. "He was desperate, talked about suicide. I offered him a position at Blackwood Enterprises, a chance to start over. He never mentioned that, because he refused. Said he couldn't work for the man who'd acquired his life's work." Thad's voice had grown quieter. "That was the last time I saw him alive." The raw emotion in his voice gave her pause. Before she could respond, her email chimed again. This time, it was from Vivian, with a simple subject line, "What he doesn't want you to see." Against Thad's advice, she opened it. Attached was a sealed court document, a wrongful death lawsuit filed by her mother against Blackwood Enterprises following her father's suicide, alleging Thad's direct responsibility. According to the document, the case had been settled out of court for an undisclosed sum, with all records sealed. "My mother sued you." The revelation hit like a physical blow. "And you paid her off?" "It wasn't like that," Thad said urgently. "Your mother was grief-stricken, manipulated by lawyers who saw an opportunity. I settled because dragging your family through a public legal battle seemed cruel. Yet you never told me any of this." She gathered her things, heading for the door. "I need some air." "Larissa, don't." She held up a hand. "I can't do this right now." Outside, Seattle's damp air filled her lungs as she walked aimlessly, trying to process everything. The lawsuit, the settlement. Her mother had never mentioned any of it, had used the money to keep their home, to fund Larissa's education, all while letting her believe they were surviving on savings and insurance. Her phone rang again. Her mother. "Mom?" She answered, voice shaking. "Honey, is everything all right? I just got the strangest call from someone asking about the Blackwood settlement." Larissa froze mid-step. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing, of course. The agreement was confidential." Her mother paused. "Larissa, why is someone asking about this now? After all these years?" "It's complicated." "Mom, did you believe Thad was responsible for Dad's death?" A long silence followed. "Initially, yes. I was angry, looking for someone to blame." Her voice softened. "But the truth was more complicated. Your father had been battling depression for years before MaxCore. The business failure was the final straw, not the sole cause. Why didn't you ever tell me about the lawsuit? The settlement? You were so young, so hurt. And the settlement came with conditions, confidentiality, mainly." Her mother sighed. "Are you working for Thaddeus Blackwood now? Is that what this is about?" "Yes." "Be careful, Larissa. Not because he's a bad man. I don't believe that anymore. But because the past has a way of distorting the present when you let it." After hanging up, Larissa stood at the edge of Puget Sound, watching ferries cross the gray water. Everything she thought she knew about her father's death, about Thad's role in it, was being rewritten. When she returned to the hotel hours later, she found an envelope under her door. Inside was a handwritten note from Thad. "I've returned to Boston. The Seattle team will assist with remaining meetings. When you're ready to hear the complete truth, no documents, no lawyers, just the unvarnished facts, you know where to find me." Beneath his signature was a postscript. "Before you make any decisions, remember who benefits most from turning you against me." Larissa sat on the edge of the bed, the note in her trembling hands. The pain of her father's death, buried for years, had resurfaced with all its original intensity. But now it was tangled with new emotions, confusion about her mother's silence, uncertainty about Thad's role, and a growing suspicion about Pierce's motives. Most unsettling of all was the realization that despite everything, she missed Thad's presence, the steadiness he provided, even amid the storm of revelations. Her phone chimed with another text from an unknown number. "Flight booked for you. Boston, tomorrow morning. Time to end this charade. HP." She stared at the message, then at Thad's note. Two paths forward, two versions of the truth. The choice was hers alone. Thad stared at the Boston skyline from his office, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked windows. 3 days had passed since his abrupt departure from Seattle. 3 days without word from Larissa. The Seattle project continued without him, their team executing the plans flawlessly, but her absence from the daily reports suggested she had chosen Pierce's path. Diane entered without knocking, her expression grave. "The board is asking questions. Vivian's making noise about a hostile takeover. And your architect has gone dark." "She's not my architect," Thad replied, his voice carefully neutral. "What's Pierce's latest move?" "He's scheduled meetings with our 3 largest investors." Diane handed him a tablet. "And there's this." The screen displayed a business news article. "Blackwood Enterprises faces questions about past business practices." The piece referenced anonymous sources alleging ethical breaches, with specific mention of MaxCore properties. "They're setting the stage," Thad said, returning the tablet. "Undermining confidence before making their official play. It's working. Stock's down 12% since yesterday." Diane studied him. "This is personal for Pierce, isn't it? Beyond business." It always was. Thad moved to his desk, pressing the intercom. Jordan, have security send up the Winters file from the archives. The complete version. Already did that yesterday, Jordan replied. It's in your private safe. After Diane left, Thad opened the safe, extracting a thick file that contained everything. The original acquisition plans for Max Corp, the discovery of the Sanderson building's structural issues, the revised plans to salvage what they could, and finally, the wrongful death lawsuit. At the back was an envelope he hadn't opened in years. Inside was a handwritten note from Maxwell Winters, delivered the day before his suicide. You've taken everything. I hope it was worth it. The intercom buzzed. Sir, Harrison Pierce is in the lobby, insisting on seeing you. Thad hesitated only briefly. Send him up. Pierce entered with the confident stride of a man who believed he'd already won. At 45, he maintained the athletic build of his college rowing days, his silver-streaked hair adding gravitas to his appearance. Bold move. Coming here, Thad said, remaining seated. Courtesy call. Pierce settled into a chair uninvited. Before the board meeting tomorrow, where you'll announce your takeover attempt. Pierce smiled. Where I'll present evidence of your involvement in the Max Corp collapse. The cover-up afterward. The settlement that essentially admitted guilt. You've been planning this for years. A decade, actually. Ever since you forced my uncle out of his partnership with Maxwell. Pierce examined his manicured nails. Patience is a virtue, Thaddeus. And manipulation is your specialty, Thad countered. Using Larissa Winters as a pawn? That's low, even for you. Ms. Winters deserves to know what kind of man you are. Pierce's smile faded. Though I must admit, your interest in her seems to have evolved beyond professional. Unexpected complication. Thad kept his expression neutral, unwilling to give Pierce the satisfaction of confirming his suspicions about his feelings for Larissa. What do you want, Harrison? Beyond revenge. Seattle. The Morrison Project. Sign it over to Ashcroft Industries, and I might consider a less public dismantling of your reputation. Thad laughed without humor. You overplay your hand. The board won't act without conclusive evidence of wrongdoing, which doesn't exist. Doesn't it? Pierce stood. Ask yourself this. Where is Larissa Winters right now? Who is she talking to? What documents might she have access to that could change the equation? A cold wave of uncertainty washed over Thad, but he maintained his composure. Get out of my office. With pleasure. Pierce paused at the door. One last thing. Did you know Maxwell Winters kept a private journal? Fascinating reading, especially the entries just before his death. After Pierce left, Thad's facade cracked. If such a journal existed, if Maxwell had documented their final conversations. He grabbed his phone, dialing Larissa's number. Straight to voicemail. Again, on Mercer Island, just outside Seattle, Larissa sat in a small rented cottage. The journal her mother had sent her opened on the table. Her father's handwriting filled pages with business notes, personal reflections, and increasingly desperate entries as Max Corp collapsed. The most painful pages detailed his final meeting with Thad. Blackwood offered me a position today. Claimed he wanted to salvage something from the wreckage of my company. His company now, I suppose. Charity dressed as opportunity. I refused. A man can lose everything but his dignity. No mention of suicide. No direct accusation that Thad had deliberately destroyed Max Corp. Just the raw pain of a proud man facing failure. Her phone buzzed with another text from Pierce. Your flight to Boston leaves in 3 hours. Car will pick you up. She had ignored his previous messages, needing time to process everything. The journal had provided some clarity, but questions remained. Why was Pierce so invested in her situation? What did he gain from turning her against Thad? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find a young woman in a Blackwood Enterprises jacket. Ms. Winters? Eliza Chun, Seattle office. She handed Larissa a thumb drive. Mr. Mercer asked me to deliver this directly to you. Said you'd understand its significance. After Eliza left, Larissa plugged the drive into her laptop. It contained a single video file, security footage from Blackwood's Boston office dated 10 years earlier. She watched as Harrison Pierce entered a conference room with a man she recognized from photos as her father's business partner, Camden Reynolds. There was no audio, but the exchange appeared intense. Pierce handed Reynolds an envelope. Reynolds examined the contents, then nodded. The timestamp showed this meeting occurred 3 days before the banks called in Max Corp's loans. Her phone rang. Diane Mercer. Did you receive the file? Diane asked without preamble. Yes. What am I looking at? The missing piece. Pierce's connection to Maxwell's partner. The money that changed hands just before confidential information about MaxCore's financial situation leaked to the banks. Why show me this now? Because Pierce is making his move tomorrow. Board meeting at 9. Diane paused. And because Thad is too stubborn to ask for your help directly. After hanging up, Larissa stared at the frozen image on her screen. Pierce and Reynolds, conspirators in a decade-old scheme that had destroyed her father and was now threatening Thad. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, but this time it wasn't Pierce. He keeps your father's file in his private safe. Still reads it sometimes, especially when he can't sleep. Jordan. Larissa closed her father's journal, suddenly certain of what she needed to do. Not for Thad, not even for her father's memory, but for herself, to finally break free from the past that had defined her for too long. As she packed her bag, a final text arrived from Pierce. Car arriving in 30 minutes. Your chance for justice awaits in Boston. She smiled grimly as she typed her response. I'll find my own way to Boston. And my own justice. Boston greeted Larissa with chilling rain as she stepped out of the airport terminal. She had deliberately chosen a later flight than the one Pierce arranged, needing time to formulate a plan. It was nearly midnight when her taxi pulled up to a modest apartment building in Cambridge. You sure this is the right address? The driver asked, peering through rain-streaked windows at the unremarkable structure. I'm sure, Larissa replied, paying the fare before hurrying through the downpour. Marcus Jenkins, her father's former assistant at MaxCore, opened the door on her second knock. Now in his 60s, his once dark hair had gone completely silver, but his sharp eyes remained the same. Larissa Winters, he said, genuine surprise in his voice. When Diane Mercer called saying you might visit, I hardly believed it. Thank you for seeing me so late, she said, following him inside. His apartment was small but meticulously organized, with architectural drawings framed on the walls. Her father's work, she realized with a pang. You kept these, she murmured, studying a familiar design. Your father had vision. Marcus gestured for her to sit. But I suspect you're not here for a trip down memory lane. I need to understand what really happened with MaxCore. She met his gaze directly. The truth about Thaddeus Blackwood and Harrison Pierce. Marcus's expression hardened at Pierce's name. I wondered when that snake would resurface. He disappeared briefly into another room, returning with a worn leather portfolio. I kept these against legal advice. Thought someday they might matter. Inside were copies of internal MaxCore documents, financial reports, meeting minutes, and email printouts that painted a damning picture. Harrison Pierce, through his uncle Camden Reynolds, had systematically undermined MaxCore from within while simultaneously arranging for the flawed Sanderson property deal that would become the company's downfall. Reynolds deliberately concealed the structural issues in the Sanderson building during the acquisition, Marcus explained. Then Pierce leaked information about MaxCore's precarious financial position to the banks, triggering the loan recalls. And Blackwood tried to structure a managed bankruptcy that would have preserved core assets. Marcus shook his head. Your father refused to believe it. His pride wouldn't let him accept help from the man acquiring his company, even if that acquisition could have saved jobs and projects. Larissa absorbed this, comparing it with what Thad had told her. Why would Pierce go to such lengths? Revenge, initially. Your father forced Reynolds out after discovering he was embezzling. Pierce took it personally. Marcus hesitated. But now, I suspect it's about the Seattle project. How do you know about Seattle? Diane Mercer reached out last week. Pierce has been acquiring properties surrounding the development through shell companies. If he controls Blackwood Enterprises, he controls the entire area, worth billions in potential development. Larissa leaned back, the full picture finally emerging. So I'm just a tool. A way to destabilize Thad before Pierce makes his move. A particularly effective tool, Marcus agreed, given Blackwood's unexpected interest in you. She caught the implication in his tone. We have a professional relationship. Marcus smiled knowingly. I've worked with Blackwood occasionally over the years. Never seen him rattled, until Diane mentioned you were working with him. He closed the portfolio. Pierce is counting on your emotional response, clouding your judgment. The question is, what will you do now that you know? Dawn was breaking when Larissa left, the portfolio tucked securely in her bag. She checked into a hotel to shower, and change before heading to Blackwood Enterprises. The board meeting would begin in 2 hours. In the lobby, she encountered Jordan, who assessed her with obvious relief. "You came back. I need to see him." Jordan shook her head. "He's in pre-meeting preparations with legal." Pierce arrived 20 minutes ago with Vivian and a team of lawyers. She lowered her voice. "It's getting ugly. They're claiming to have proof of ethical violations, using your father's case as the centerpiece." "I need 5 minutes," Larissa insisted. Jordan hesitated, then nodded toward a private elevator. Security code 6829 goes directly to the executive floor. Upstairs, Larissa found the corridor buzzing with activity. Through glass walls, she saw Thad surrounded by attorneys, his expression stone-cold as he reviewed documents. Across the hall, Pierce and Vivian huddled with their own legal team. It was Vivian who spotted her first, nudging Pierce, whose face registered genuine surprise before settling into a calculating smile. He excused himself and approached her. "Ms. Winters, I was beginning to think you'd reconsidered our arrangement." "No arrangement, Pierce. Just clarifying facts." She held up the portfolio. "Like your role in MaxCore's collapse. Your uncle's fraud. The manipulation you've orchestrated for a decade." His smile faltered slightly. "Careful accusations, especially without proof." "I have proof. And witnesses." She nodded toward Marcus Jenkins, who had just stepped off the elevator. "My father's assistant, who documented everything." Pierce's composure cracked. "Documents can be forged. Memories fade. After 10 years, who'll believe?" "I will," came Thad's voice from behind them. He stood in the doorway of the conference room, his gaze moving from Larissa to Marcus, then settling on Pierce with cold intensity. "The board will convene in 15 minutes. Perhaps you'd like to reconsider your presentation?" Pierce recovered quickly. "This changes nothing, Blackwood." "It changes everything," Larissa countered. "Starting with the narrative you've been selling about what happened to my father." As Pierce retreated to confer urgently with Vivian, Thad approached Larissa. "You came back. I needed answers. Real ones." She met his gaze. "I found them. And we have a board to convince." She gestured toward the conference room doors. "After you." For the first time since she'd known him, Thaddeus Blackwood smiled. Truly smiled. With relief and something deeper that neither was ready to name. The boardroom had fallen silent. 12 members of Blackwood Enterprises' executive board sat around the polished mahogany table, expressions ranging from shock to calculation as they processed the evidence Larissa and Marcus had presented. At the far end, Harrison Pierce and Vivian Ashcroft had abandoned their earlier confidence, now huddled with their attorneys in urgent, whispered consultation. "Let me ensure I understand correctly," said Eleanor Harrington, the board's senior member, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the documents. "You're alleging that Mr. Pierce, through his uncle, deliberately sabotaged MaxCore Properties a decade ago, and is now attempting to use that same incident to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Blackwood Enterprises?" "The evidence speaks for itself," Thad replied. "Bank records showing payments from Pierce to individuals at the lending institutions that called in MaxCore's loans. Documentation of the structural issues in the Sanderson building that were concealed during the sale. And now, property acquisitions surrounding our Seattle development, purchased through shell companies traced back to Ashcroft Industries." Pierce stood abruptly. "This is absurd. These alleged documents could easily be fabricated. They're authenticated," Diane Mercer interrupted, sliding a folder across the table. "Our forensic accounting team worked through the night. The signatures, dates, transaction records, all verified." "Furthermore," Larissa added, "my father's former assistant has provided sworn testimony about Camden Reynolds' activities within MaxCore, including diversion of funds and deliberate concealment of structural problems in the Sanderson acquisition." Marcus Jenkins nodded from his seat along the wall. "I've maintained these records for a decade, anticipating this day might come." Pierce's face flushed with anger. "This is a coordinated attack on my reputation." "No, Harrison," Thad interrupted, his voice steady. "This is accountability. Long overdue." Eleanor Harrington cleared her throat. "I believe we've heard enough. Mr. Pierce, Ms. Ashcroft, I think it would be best if you excused yourselves while the board deliberates." The door had barely closed behind them when the board erupted in urgent discussion. Through the glass walls, Larissa could see Pierce and Vivian in heated argument in the corridor, their alliance visibly fracturing under pressure. They'll drop the takeover attempt, Diane murmured beside her. Pierce's reputation will be shattered when this becomes public. Will it become public? Larissa asked. That depends on what happens next, Thad replied, joining them. The board wants to speak with you. Alone. 30 minutes later, Larissa emerged from the boardroom to find Thad waiting in his office, staring out at the Boston skyline with the same contemplative expression she'd first seen in Seattle. They offered me a position, she said, still processing the conversation. Senior Director of Sustainable Development, overseeing the Seattle project's completion. He turned, searching her face. And I said I'd consider it. She moved to stand beside him at the window. There's something I need to address first. Your father. She nodded. For years, I've carried this weight. Anger, guilt, grief. Built my career trying to redeem a legacy I thought was tarnished by failure. She met his gaze directly. I need to let that go. And can you? He asked quietly. Knowing everything now? I'm starting to. She took a deep breath. My father made choices. You made choices. Pierce manipulated circumstances, but he couldn't have succeeded without the decisions each of you made. Rain began falling outside, streaking the glass between them and the city beyond. What Pierce did was unforgivable, Thad said. But I've carried my share of responsibility. I could have fought harder for Max Core, found another solution. His voice softened. When I saw your application cross my desk, at first, I thought it might be a chance to make amends. And now, something shifted in his expression, vulnerability she'd never seen before. Now it's about something else entirely. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings neither was quite ready to name. The Seattle project, she said, breaking the silence. I'd like to finish it. On one condition. Name it. Complete transparency. Between us and with the communities the project will affect. She held his gaze. No more buried secrets, no more hidden agendas. Agreed. He extended his hand, but when she took it, neither seemed willing to let go. 1 year later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Morrison development drew hundreds despite Seattle's characteristic drizzle. What had begun as an ambitious concept had evolved into something revolutionary. A sustainable urban community that harmonized modern architecture with environmental preservation, creating spaces where people could truly thrive. From the edge of the crowd, Larissa watched as Thad delivered remarks to the assembled press and dignitaries. She'd been in Seattle for 2 weeks overseeing final details, while he'd arrived only yesterday. Their demanding schedules often kept them in different cities, but somehow they'd built something neither had expected, a partnership that transcended professional boundaries. Quite an achievement, came a familiar voice beside her. Her mother stood there, elegant in a simple blue dress, gazing up at the buildings with undisguised pride. It's beautiful, isn't it? Larissa said, linking arms with her. Dad would have loved it. He would have, her mother agreed. But more importantly, he would have loved the woman you've become. She nodded toward Thad, who was now looking through the crowd for Larissa. And he understands you in a way few could. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Thad led Larissa to a quiet rooftop garden overlooking the development. I have something for you, he said, producing a small wrapped package. Inside was a journal, similar to her father's, but new, its pages blank. For new beginnings, he explained. New visions. It's perfect, she said softly, then reached into her bag. I have something for you too. She handed him an envelope containing architectural plans, a concept for a new foundation headquartered in Boston, dedicated to supporting innovative sustainable design projects for communities in need. The Maxwell Winters Foundation, he read, his voice catching slightly. Larissa, this is our next project, she finished. If you're interested. His answer came not in words, but in the way he closed the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt like both an ending and a beginning. The final healing of old wounds and the first chapter of a story entirely their own. As evening fell over Seattle, lights illuminated their creation below, a testament to what could be built when past pain gave way to future possibility, when walls crumbled to reveal unexpected connection, and when two people who never planned to find each other discovered that sometimes the most beautiful designs emerge from the most unlikely blueprints. 6 years later, The sun cast a golden glow across the terrace of the penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor. Larissa Winters Blackwood adjusted the centerpiece of wildflowers on the table, smiling as voices drifted from inside. Tonight marked the 5th anniversary of the Maxwell Winters Foundation, and their home was filled with colleagues, friends, and family gathering to celebrate. Through the open doors, she could see Thad deep in conversation with her mother, both laughing at something she'd said. The years had softened him in ways she wouldn't have thought possible when they first met. The intimidating billionaire, now comfortable in casual gatherings, genuinely interested in the people around him. "Hiding out here?" asked Diane Mercer, joining her on the terrace with 2 glasses of champagne. "Just taking a moment," Larissa replied, accepting the drink. It's been a whirlwind month. The foundation had just completed its 12th sustainable community project, this one in New Orleans. Affordable housing designed to withstand hurricanes while maintaining low environmental impact. Meanwhile, Blackwood Enterprises had continued to thrive under their joint leadership, with Larissa now serving as Executive Director of Sustainable Development alongside her role at the foundation. "Did you ever imagine this?" Diane asked, gesturing toward the gathering. "That day in the boardroom with Pierce?" Larissa shook her head. "Never. I was just trying to find the truth about my father. And found a whole life instead." Diane clinked her glass against Larissa's. "By the way, Harrison Pierce resurfaced. Some tech startup in Austin trying to recruit investors. Good luck to them," Larissa said without rancor. Time had diminished Pierce to a footnote in her story, no longer carrying the power to wound. Thad appeared in the doorway, their 3-year-old daughter Emma perched on his shoulders, her dark curls and green eyes a perfect blend of them both. "Someone refuses to sleep until she says good night to the guests," he explained, ducking carefully to bring Emma through the doorway. "Like father, like daughter," Larissa teased, lifting Emma into her arms, never wanting to miss anything important. "Speaking of important," Thad said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "This came today. I wanted to wait until now to share it." Inside was official confirmation. The sustainable design methods pioneered in their Seattle project had been adopted into the International Building Code standards, ensuring their approach would influence construction worldwide. "Your father's vision," Thad said quietly, finally realized on the scale he dreamed of. Larissa felt the familiar sting of tears, not from grief but from fulfillment. She had long since stopped carrying the weight of the past, having transformed it into purpose, into creation. As guests began gathering on the terrace for the sunset toast, Larissa found herself surrounded by the life she'd built from the ashes of tragedy. Her mother chatting with Marcus Jenkins, now the foundation's historian, Diane deep in conversation with the mayor about their next project, Emma charming everyone with her precocious observations, and Thad beside her, his hand finding hers as he had countless times since that rainy day in Seattle when walls finally crumbled. "Ready for the next chapter?" he whispered. She squeezed his hand in response. The journey that had begun with confrontation had transformed into a partnership neither had imagined possible. Proof that sometimes the most beautiful structures rise from the most challenging foundations.